What's up everybody, welcome back. So finally a new video. I had some private stuff I had to take care of that was taking up most of my time and energy, but from now on we should be back on track and we have our free-for-all mode to finish up. So today we're going to set up some kill messages on the screen, so if we kill a player we get a text on screen who you killed, and the guy who got killed got a message from which person he got shot. And we're also going to set up our directional damage indicators, and I want to show up how they work. So you could set this up a whole lot easier if you want to, but I have set them up in a way that they will keep pointing to the direction where the damage came from. So you will see if the player that shot me is moving, nothing happens, but if I start moving myself, you will see the actual damage indicator move positions, and it will actually keep track of the location where I got shot from and keep pointing to that location. So I've disabled the timing on him, so he's going to stay on screen forever right now, so you can see what's happening. But this is really what we're going to make, so you could set this up a whole lot easier if you want to, but if you set it up like this, they will actually keep track of the direction the damage came from. So this is what we're going to do today. If you like the videos, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel, and then you will get access to some premium channels in the Discord, and you will also get the project files for this project. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So first of all, there's one quick fix from the previous video I want to take a look at. So if we go to the widgets folder and open up our GameOver menu, so in here on the event graph, I actually forgot to hook up these last nodes to the set color nodes. So if we won or lost a match through time limit, the text would not have the correct color. So we can simply plug these nodes into the set color and opacity nodes, and that should be fixed. So let's compile and save, and let's start working on our new widgets. So there's one thing I forgot to mention in the intro. We're going to have a kill feed message on the right side of the screen. This is going to display for all players, so Blunt killed Stuffy. And then we're going to display a message for the guy who got killed and the guy who killed him, saying who he killed and who the killer was. So first of all, we're going to tackle the newsfeed, then we're going to tackle the killed by message, and then we're going to tackle the indicators. So that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to start with the newsfeed. So let's create a new widget, right click, user interface, and we're going to create a blueprint widget, and that's a user widget. So this is going to be our widget blueprint and then newsfeed row. And we're going to open it up. So the designer is going to be really simple. We're simply going to drag in some text over here. And then I'm going to align it to the right side. So for justification, set it to the right. And I'm going to make sure that it's a variable. So it's going to be the text newsfeed. And enable is variable. And I want to shrink it down a little bit probably. So I'm going to make it about 20 and then not bold. Or I actually have some fonts set up. So it's been a while for me. So forgive me. I'm going to copy and paste the font from here. So copy and go over here and paste it. There we go. So we want to create a UI animation for this widget. So if you do not have the animation tab over here, you can simply go to Window and then select Animations. So we're going to select the newsfeed text over here and create a new animation. So this is going to be UI animation fade out. And then select the animation itself, and we want to set keyframes for the opacity. So first of all, I'm going to add a keyframe at time 0. So I'm simply going to click the little square over here and it will create a keyframe. So then I'm going to drag it over 1 second and I'm going to set the opacity to 0 and create another keyframe. So this will simply make the text fade out over the course of 1 second. So we have the animation in place and we want to make sure our default opacity is back to 1. So if we simply close the widget and reopen it, the text is probably gone. So this is the wrong one. We need the newsfeed row. And as you can see, we need to reset the opacity over here to 1. So that's good to go. Now let's set up the graph for this. we actually need one variable, and that's the newsfeed text. So that's a text variable. Oh, I'm not really sure what happened here. There we go. So text variable, and we want to make sure that it's instance editable and also exposed on spawn. And then we need to set up our event construct. So we're going to drag in the text for the newsfeed, and we're going to set the text. And we can simply plug in the variable for the newsfeed text. So I'm misspelling things already. Let's just ignore that. Then we're going to add a little delay. So I'm going to keep this on screen for 3 seconds. So delay for 3 seconds. And then we're going to play our UI animation. So I'm going to drag in the UI animation that's part of the variables on the left side. And then we can simply drag off the animation and say play animation. So I don't think we really need to set anything in here. This should be good to go. And then this animation takes 1 second. So again, we want to add a delay over here for 1 second. And after that, we're simply going to remove ourselves from parent. So that will remove the widget. So as soon as we create it, it will set the text. And then after 3 seconds, it will start fading out and it will remove itself. So we do not have to worry about any of that stuff. So with this setup, we can actually go into our HUD. So let's go into the in-game HUD widget. And first of all, let's add 2 new things to our designer. So we're going to add the actual message for the kill feed. And that's simply going to be a text. So let's drag in a new text somewhere on the empty canvas panel. And I'm going to raise it up a little bit. So over here, we're going to make sure the text is a variable again. So let's give it a name. And this is going to be the text for the kill message. And enable is variable. So for now, I'm just going to say you killed. And make sure that we have our font in place. So let's grab something like this maybe. And paste it over here. So that should be good. So I'm going to say size to content over here and make sure that it's anchored to the center of the screen. The alignment, I'm going to make sure that it's also centered. So position 0 and then for alignment 0.5. So that should make it nicely centered. And with that one in place, we also want to add a vertical box for our newsfeed. So let's look for a vertical box. And I'm going to drop it on the right side of the screen over here. And we want to make sure that this vertical box is a variable as well. So I'm going to name this vertbox newsfeed. And enable is variable. Then I'm also going to set the alignment to 1 and 1. And after that, I'm going to enable size to content and make sure that it's kind of aligned with our player info widget over here. So that should be something like this, and that should be fine. So with that stuff in place, we can dive into the graph and start setting things up over here. So let me grab my notes quickly. First of all, we want to go to the event graph, and we're going to create a function for the kill message, or an event actually. So let's get rid of tick, we don't need it in here, and we're going to create a new custom event. I'm going to call this a show kill message. And we actually need a few inputs. So the first one is a boolean, and that's isKiller. And then we need 2 text variables, one for the victim name and one for the killer name. So those are text variables. And that should be good to go. So first let's grab our text for the kill message. Drag it in, and we're going to set the visibility. And make sure that it's visible. Plug it in over here. And after that, we want to know if we are the killer or the victim. So we're going to grab a branch and we're going to plug it into the isKiller boolean. And depending on which one we are, we want to change the text. So let's grab our text for the kill message again, and we're going to set the text. So for the text, we're going to format it. So drag off here and look for format text. And if we are the killer, I'm going to say you killed and then the name of the victim. So you killed, then open bracket, a close bracket. And then we can plug in the victim name into the A pin over here and plug this one in the true pin. So we can copy and paste it for the victim. So plug that one into the false pin. And in this case, we're going to say killed by. And then again, we can plug in the name from the function or event. So that's the killer name in this case. So with that stuff in place, we can add a delay over here. So it's going to stay on screen for a little bit. Let's say something like 3 seconds, whatever you like. So I'm going to say 3 seconds. And after that, we can simply hide our text again. So grab the set visibility node and over here, make sure that we set it back to hidden. And that should be good to go. Now we do need to go into the designer and we want to set this to hidden by default. So select our text kill message and make sure on the right side we're going to set this to hidden. Compile and save. Okay, and then we also want to create a function to add some text to our newsfeed. So I'm going to create a new function for that and call it add line to newsfeed. We're going to give this one input and that's a text variable for the newsfeed line. And then we can simply create the newsfeed row widget. So we're going to drag off here and create a widget. So we want to select our widget blueprint newsfeed row. So we can plug in the text from the function input. For the owning player, we're simply going to get our owning player. Or we actually have a variable for that probably. So we have our shooter player controller in here. So we can plug that in directly. And then we want to grab our vertical box newsfeed. And we're going to add a child. And we simply want to add the widget that we just created. Plug it in over here. And that's good to go. So the widget will delete itself after 3 seconds. Or 4 seconds actually. So that should be good to go. So we're done inside of our widget. And at this point we need to go into our player controller to make sure we have replicated events to show all this stuff. So let's start with the player controller. Go to the framework and open our shooter player controller. So in the event graph we need a few events so the server can tell us to update things on our HUD. So let's create a custom event. And the first one is going to be UI show kill message. So this is going to be replicated to run on the owning client. And then we need a few inputs. And we can actually grab those from the widget event. So we can simply grab our in-game HUD widget. And first of all, let's make sure that it's valid. Plug it in, and if it's valid, we want to call our show kill message event. Plug it into the isValid pin, and we simply want to pass on the variables to the event. So we can plug them in like this. And that should be good to go. And the next thing we want to do is create a similar event for the newsfeed. So that's going to be UI update newsfeed. And again, we want to make sure that it's set to run on the owning client. And we're going to grab our HUD, make sure that it's valid. And then we want to call our add line to newsfeed. And again, we need to make sure that we pass on the variable to the event. And that's already good to go. So with this stuff in place, we need to go into our shooter game mode. And we have a function in here that's called when a player is killed. So that's actually our PvP killed player. So I'm already in the correct function. And over here we have a branch that checks if the game is over or not, if the score limit is reached. So if this is false, we're going to display the kill message for the players on the screen. So first of all, let's make sure that we have the names stored in a local variable that will save us grabbing them a few times. So we're going to grab the victim and the killer from the input of the function. So first of all, let's start with the victim. And from the victim, we want to get the player profile. And from the profile, we can get the player name, so we can break it. And over here we have the player name, so we're going to store it in a local variable, and that's the local victim name. And we want to do the same thing for our killer, so let's grab the killer from the function input. And from the killer we want to get our profile again, and from the profile we're going to get the killer's name. And again, make a local variable for this one. So this is going to be the local killer name. So we're going to hook this up to the false pin of the previous branch in here. Plug it in and plug this one in. So for the killer, we want to grab the killer variable again, and then we're going to call our UI show kill message. So UI show kill message. That's the function we just created on the player controller, and in this case I am the killer, so I'm going to enable isKiller, and I need to plug in the victim name. And then we're going to do the same thing for the victim, so let's grab the victim. And we want to set our UI show kill message again. And in this case, we are not the killer, so we're going to leave this disabled, and we're going to plug in the killer name. So we have that in our local variables, killer name, and that's good to go as well. So with those in place, we want to grab our newsfeed line, and we want to display those for all players. So I'm going to make that a local variable as well. Otherwise, we need to create it 4 times. And if we create a variable, we can use that one. So let's create a new local text variable, local newsfeed line. And again, that's a text. So we're going to set it over here, and we're going to format the text. And this is simply going to say open bracket A, close bracket, and then killed by open bracket B, close bracket. And we can plug in the killer and the victim name. So we can grab the killer name for the A pin and the victim name for the B pin. So we need to hook this up over here. And then we want to grab all of our connected player controllers, and we're going to get a for each loop. And for every controller, we want to call our UI update newsfeed and plug in the newsfeed line. And that should make everything work. So right now, if someone gets killed, the message will display for the killer and the victim, and for all players, it will update the newsfeed. So we can have a quick test to see if this is working, and then we can start working on the damage indicators. So let's host the game and make sure that we have another profile over here. And let's make this a free-for-all game. Ready up, and let's see what happens. So we have the text message showing up, and we have the newsfeed on the right side showing up. So that's actually working. That's good. Now we can start working on the damage indicator. So for the damage indicators, we want to add some stuff to our damage enumeration. So if we go to the AI folder, we have a damage direction enumeration. And right now we have 4 directions for the hit animations and the death animations. And we're going to add 4 more of them for the UI. So let's add 4 enumerators. So that's going to be front left, and then front right, and also back left and back right. So back left, and the last one back right. So we have 8 of them now, and with that stuff in place, we can dive into the widget. So let's open up our in-game HUD. And for this, I actually took my blood overlay image and simply chopped it up into 8 different images. So this was the original image. And what I did is simply chop them up into 8 different pieces. So in the end, I got this, and each of this is a separate image. So as you can see, all of them are their own image, and I simply added them: blood front, front right, right, back right, back left, etc, etc. So you want to add 8 of those images, and by default you're going to set the opacity over here to 0. Make sure the images are variables, and with that stuff in place you're good to start. So then we can go to the event graph. Let's get rid of everything else. So in event pre-construct over here, we want to get a reference to our controlled pawn. So let's grab our player controller, and from here we're going to get our controlled pawn. Not controller, but controlled. There we go. And then we can store this as a variable. So we don't need to cast it. We're simply going to promote it the way it is. And that's going to be our controlled pawn. Plug it in, and that's good to go already. Then we also want to make sure that on event construct over here, we set the opacity for each of our images. So we can get rid of the original blood overlay image, and we want to drag in all 8 of the new ones. And then make sure that we reset the opacity to 0. So we have right. And I'm probably missing a few. So 4, I'm missing 1, front, left. There we go. So make sure that we plug everything in over here. So we start with a clean slate. There we go. So now we start. We're going to start creating a few functions, and the first one is going to be to calculate our damage direction. So let's call it calculate damage direction. So we have a similar function to this inside of our character, but that one only returns 4 of the enumerators. So we're going to just create a new one for the damage indicator. We need an input over here, and that's going to be the damage location or the attack location, and that's going to be a vector. And then we also need a local variable in here for the damage yaw. So that's our local damage yaw, and we're also going to add one for the damage enumeration. So let's create a local variable damage yaw, and that's a float. And the second one we need is our local damage direction, and that's our damage direction enumeration. There we go. So for the attack location, we're going to drag off here, and we're going to get a unit direction vector, and we want to get it from our controlled pawn. So we're going to drag in the controlled pawn, and we're going to get the actor location and plug that into the 2 pin. And from here we want to make a rotator from Z. So make a rotator from Z. And for the result we're going to split the struct pin. And we're only going to bother with the yaw. So we're going to drag off the yaw, and we're going to do minus. So subtract. And we want to get the control rotation of our controlled pawn. So drag off the controlled pawn, and we're going to get the control rotation. And then we can split this one as well. And we're going to grab the Z from this and plug it into the subtract node. And then the result of this, we're going to normalize the axis. Normalize axis over here. And the result of this is going to be our damage yaw. So we're going to grab our local damage yaw and plug it in over here. So now we have something to work with, and we need to figure out which enumeration belongs to this yaw. So we're going to grab a branch over here, and the first thing we're going to do is check if it's greater or lower than 0. So let's drag in the damage yaw, and we want to know if it's less than. Plug it in over here. So first let's do the false bin, so that means it's actually above 0. So we're going to grab a branch in here. And if our local damage yaw is greater than or equal to 175, so greater than or equal, and simply type 175 over here, plug it in. So if this is true, we're actually shot from the back, so we're going to grab our local damage direction, plug it in and set it to back. If this is false, we're going to grab another branch, plug it in, and this time we want to check if the local damage yaw is less than or equal to 23, so less than or equal to, and I'm going to set 23 in here. So if this is true, we're actually hit from the front, so we're going to grab a setter again, plug it in, and set this to front. If this is false, then we're going to check an in range for the local damage yaw. So let's grab another branch in here, plug it in, grab the local damage yaw. And this time we want to grab an in range for float. And we want to know if it's in between 23 and 68. So 23 and 68 for the maximum. And I'm going to disable includes min and max. Plug this into the branch. So if this is true, we are hit from the front right. So plug it into the true pin and set it to front right. Then we're going to grab another branch with the in range. Plug it into the false pin again. This time we want to check if the minimum is 115 and the maximum is 157, sorry, so 157. And if this is true, we're hit from the back right. So we're going to plug this in over here and then back right. And if this is false, we are actually hit from the right side. So we can simply plug it in directly and select right side. So this will cover the right half of our damage yaw. And now we need to do the same thing for when it's below 0. And we can actually make it pretty simple. By simply making this a positive number. So we're going to grab our local damage yaw and we're going to grab a getter for it as well. And then we're going to make it absolute. So that will turn a negative number into a positive number. Then we can plug it in over here. And we can simply copy all of this stuff below and paste it over here. Plug it in. And then all we need to do is make sure that we actually change this from right to left. So the back and the front are good to go. And then this is going to be front left. And this is going to be back left. And then the last one is going to be simply left. So that should take care of our damage direction. And now all we want to do is grab a return node. And make sure that we plug in all of our branches and actually return our damage direction. So let's make sure that we do not forget any of these. There we go, there's one left over here. And we want to make sure that we grab the local damage direction and we return it. So that should be good to go. Let's compile and save this one. And then we're going to create another function to create a new damage indicator. So let's go to functions, create a new one. And I'm going to call this create damage indicator. So again, we're going to give it one input, and that's the attack location. And we also need a few variables just to work with in general. So we're going to create a new variable, and the first one is going to be our indicator enums. And that's the damage direction enumerator, but we want to turn it into an array. And then we also need an array for the attack locations. So let's create another variable, and that's the attack locations. So that's going to be an array of vectors. And we also need an array for the indicator durations. So indicator durations. And that's going to be an array of floats. So with that stuff in place, we can first call our calculate damage direction over here. So let's drag in the function and plug in our attack location. So this will return an enumeration, and we're actually going to use a local variable for this as well. So we're going to create a local variable and call it local enum index. So this is simply going to be a single integer. And the first thing we want to do is grab a setter for the local enum index, and then we're going to drag in our indicator enums over here, and we're going to find, plug in the damage direction that comes from the calculate damage direction, plug this one in over here. So if this is greater than or equal to 0, that means we actually already have an indicator with this enumeration, and in that case we're going to replace that indicator. And if this returns -1, we do not have an indicator with this enumerator, so we're going to create a new one. So we're going to grab a branch over here and make sure that the enum index is greater than or equal to 0, plug it into the condition. So if this is true, it's an existing one, and we're going to override the existing indicator. So we're going to grab our attack locations, and we're going to set an array element. Plug it into the true pin. So we're going to set it to the attack location of the input. So let's drag it off to the input of the event. Let's make sure that we enable size to fit, and the index is going to be the enumeration index in the local variable. And then we also want to grab our indicator durations, and we're going to set an array element in here as well. Plug it in. So we're going to replace an existing one, and we're simply going to set each indicator to stay on screen for about 1 second. So I'm going to set the duration over here, which is the actual item of the array. And I'm simply going to set it to 1 second manually, then plug in the enum index in the index, make sure we enable size to fit, and that should be good. So if we want to create a new damage indicator, we want to actually add something to our attack locations array. So we're going to add and plug in our attack location from the event or function. So this is going to be connected to the false pin. And after we did that, we want to set our indicator duration again. So we can plug in the set array element and use the integer from the add node as the index. And with that in place, we're done over here. So we can grab a return node, and this should be good to go. So we need to go back into our event graph, and in here we can actually create a function to fade out indicators. So let's do that first as well. Let's create a new custom event, and I'm going to call this indicators fade out. So indicators fade out. And we actually need an array for this. So we're going to create a new array, and that's going to be of image objects. So let's create a new variable, and that's our indicators to fade out. And we need to look for an image and actually select this one. So the object type image, and then we're going to turn it into an array. So we're going to drag in this array, and we're going to check if it's empty or not. So is not empty. Hook this up to a branch. So if the array is not empty, we're going to loop through the array and fade out the indicators. So because we're going to make a loop in here, I want to add a delay until next tick. So that will make sure that things don't break as easily. So let's say delay until next tick, and then we're going to grab a for each loop, plug it in, and for the for each loop, we're going to loop through the indicators to fade out. And then we can simply grab a branch in here. So we can hook it up to the loop body. And we actually want to check the current color and opacity. So let's drag off the array element and get the color and opacity. And we can break it. And we're interested in the alpha. So we want to know if the current alpha is greater than... first let's subtract it. So we're going to drag off the alpha and do subtract. And we're going to do 0.05. And then we're going to check if this is greater than or equal to 0. So greater than or equal to 0. Plug this one into the condition. So if this is true, then we're actually going to set the color and opacity. So drag off the array element again, set color and opacity. Plug it into the true pin. And in this case, we want to, actually, we can do it easier. We can just set the opacity so we don't have to worry about the color. So look for set opacity, plug that one into the true pin. So the opacity comes from the subtract node over here. And if this is false, we can simply remove it from the array. So then we're going to grab our indicators to fade out and we're going to remove an index. And grab the index from the array over here, plug this one into the false pin. So if it's completely faded out, we're going to remove it from the array. And if this for each loop is done, we're going to loop back to the beginning. So we're going to check if we still have indicators in the array left to fade out. If we do, we're going to continue fading them out. If the array is empty, we're going to break out of it. So that's the fade out function. With that one in place, we want to create the show and hide damage indicator events or functions, sorry. So for that, we're going to create a new function again. And the first one is show damage indicator. Oh, really? Excuse me, I had to cough. So show damage indicator, and we're going to give it an input, and that's the damage direction. So let's call it direction, and that's our damage direction enum. And we want to switch on the damage direction. So drag off here, switch on, and we get a list of all of our enumerators. And then we can simply set those. So we can create a local variable for the indicator texture and for the indicator image. So let me double check my notes quickly. Yeah, we're going to make a local variable. And the first one is going to be the local indicator texture. And this is going to be a single variable, and then we want a texture 2D. And the second local variable is going to be our local indicator image. So local indicator image. And this one is going to be an image. So simply image. There we go. And then we want to make sure that we grab our local indicator image setter over here, plug it into the front, and we want to grab our corresponding blood image, so blood front, and plug it in over here. So we want to do it for all 8 of the directions. So let's make sure that we copy this a few times. That's really not too neat. Okay, so we have the image back. Replace it over here, and then we have image left, image right. So you just want to go through the list and make sure that you connect the correct image to the correct damage enumerator. So we have front left over here, and then we have front right, and we have back left, and the last one is going to be back right. So obviously you want to make it look a little bit cleaner, but this should work for now. And then we're going to grab our local indicator image again. So let's grab in the texture over here, or the local variable, sorry. And we're simply going to set the opacity. And we want to set it to something like a 0.6 or 0.7. So I'm not going to make them entirely 1 opacity. So I just think it looks a little bit better like this, but that's whatever you prefer. And make sure that we hook everything up. And so I noticed I kind of didn't need the other local variable, but for now it doesn't really matter. So we have this function in place, and that's good to go. And then we also want to make one to hide our damage indicators. And we can actually copy this one because it's pretty similar. So let's go to this, duplicate it, and we're going to call this hide damage indicator. And again, the input is going to be a direction. We're going to switch on the enum, and we want to set our indicator image. So that's good to go. Then we're going to grab our indicator images to fade out. So that's the array. And in here, we want to add an element. So we're going to plug this over to this pin. Let's get rid of this over here. So we want to add our local indicator image. Add that to the array, so that will make it fade out. And then we need to call our actual event to make sure that it runs. So we're simply going to call indicators to fade out. And then that's good to go. So we actually don't need the indicator texture. So let's get rid of this one. And let's go to the show damage indicator and also delete it from here. So that's my bad. There we go. So with this stuff in place, all we need to do is go back into our event graph. And in here we need one small last update. So let's go to the event graph. And in event pre-construct over here, you can do it in construct as well, doesn't really matter. I'm going to set a timer by function name. So drag off here, set timer by function name. And for the function name, we can simply call our update damage indicators. And that's actually a function we need to make. Okay, so I'm screwing up. So let's keep this node in here, and we need to create one last function, and then we're actually done. So we're going to call create update damage indicators. And in here, we're simply going to loop through all of the current indicators and make sure they're up to date. So we're going to start with our indicator durations array, and we're going to make sure that it's not empty. So let's drag off here, is not empty, and plug this into a branch. So if it's empty, we don't need to do anything. And if it's not empty, we're going to loop through them. So let's grab a for each loop, plug in our indicator durations. And in here, we're simply going to subtract the interval that we're using. So over here in the event graph, set timer by function name, we're going to put an interval. I'm going to use 0.2 seconds in here. So every 0.2 seconds, it's going to call this function. So over here, I want to subtract 0.2 from the duration. So subtract 0.2. And then we're going to simply store that again. So let's grab the indicator array, and we're going to set an array element. Plug it in, plug in the new item, and make sure that you plug in the index as well. So then we're going to grab another, no, that's not true. We're going to grab a reversed for each loop. And again, we're going to loop through the indicated durations. And this time we're going to check if they're 0 or not. So we're going to drag off the array element is less than or equal to 0, grab a branch. So if this is true, we need to remove this indicator. So that's why we're using a reversed for each loop, because we're going to remove indexes, and this way we're not going to mess ourselves up. So we're going to grab our attack locations, and we're going to remove an index. Plug it into the true pin, and we want to remove the current index that's lower than 0. And we're going to do the same thing for the indicator durations. So let's drag this one in, and again remove an index. Plug everything in. There we go. Then we want to call our HUD damage indicator function. So let's drag that one in, connect it up over here, and we want to grab our indicator enumerations array. So indicator enums, and we're gonna get the copy, plug in the index from the for each loop, and this is the indicator that we want to hide. And after that we can remove it from the indicator enums array. So let's grab this one, and again we're going to remove an index, plug it in over here, and grab the index from the array index. Make sure you plug in the array as well. So then we have the indicator removed from all the arrays. The next thing we're going to do is grab another for each loop. This one is a normal one, and we can loop through all of our new attack locations. So for every attack location we want to get the damage direction, so we're going to calculate damage direction, plug it in, plug in the array element, and then we're simply going to store those in a local variable. So we're going to create our local new damage directions array, local variable, create one, local new damage directions. So that's an array of our damage direction enumeration. Drag it in over here, and we want to set an array element. So we can plug this in over here. The item is the damage direction that returns, and the index comes from the for each loop. Make sure that it's sized to fit. So we're going to end up with an updated array of damage directions, and we already have a current array of damage directions as well. So what we're going to do next is grab another for each loop, plug it in over here, and first we're going to loop through all of our current indicators. And we're simply going to compare them to our local indicators. So let's drag in the local indicators, and in here we're going to find. So we want to find the array element, and then if this is equal to -1, so if this doesn't exist yet, then we want to hide this damage indicator. So let's do equal to -1. Let's grab a branch, plug it in over here. And then we're going to hide the damage indicator. So we have our function for that. Drag it in over here. Oh, plug it in. And the one that we want to hide is the one from the array element. So if the new damage directions does not contain the one that we're already displaying, we need to hide it. And we're going to do the same thing the other way around. So we're going to grab another for each loop, and this time we're going to loop through the new damage directions. Plug it in over here, and we're going to compare them to our existing ones. So our indicator enums, we're going to drag it in, and we're going to find an item, plug in the array element. So if we cannot find it, so if this is -1, that means we have to show that current indicator because it's not in the current array. So we're going to grab a branch, plug it into the loop body. And in this case, we want to show the damage indicator. So that goes in the true pin, and we want to show the array element. So with all of that updating done, we can simply grab our indicator enums array, grab a setter for it, plug it into the completed pin, and we're going to set it to the local variable. So right now we are good to go, and we can start over again. So with this function in place, we can compile, save. So remember, we set this to -0.2 seconds. So we're going to go back to the event graph, set timer by function name, and we're going to keep the time 0.2 seconds. So those two will match up. Then we're going to enable looping, and we're simply going to call our update damage indicator function. So if we simply type this name into the node over here, so every 0.2 seconds, it will call this function. So we should be finally good to go in our HUD, and we only have a few small things to take care of in the character, and then we should be good to go. So let's open up our hero base character. And first of all, in the event graph, we're going to need a replicated event to show the damage indicator. So let's create a new custom event. And let's call this something like a HUD create damage indicator. And in here, we're simply going to grab our in-game HUD. So let's drag that in, and we can call our create damage indicator. And we want to pass on the attack location to the event. And we need to make sure this event is set to replicate on the owning client. So we can make sure that it's called from the server, and then it will display the information on the owning client's widget. So with this event in place, we're going to go into the take PvP damage event and over here. So we have client update HUD health, and right after that we're going to create our damage indicator. So let's make a little bit of room. And in here we can simply call our function that we just created on the event graph. So we're going to call our HUD create damage indicator. And all we need now is the attack location of our attacker. So the attacker comes from the input of the event. We can simply drag off here and get the actor location and plug that into the event call. So this should be good to go, and technically this should work. So let's run a little test and see how that goes. So I did a quick little test and we're really close. It's not too bad. So first of all, let's open our hero base character again, and in our take PvP damage function, we have our client update health call, and in here, if we enable this melee damage and in boolean, it will actually play the old HUD damage indicator. So this will make the entire red marker appear. So we need to make sure that we disable this, so we can keep it for melee animations, for example. So if we get hit by a melee animation, we'll display the full damage indicator, and if we get shot, we're going to use our directional damage indicator. So make sure we disable melee damage animation inside of the PvP damage function. So compile and save, and then if we go back into our in-game HUD, so we're simply going to make it a little bit easier to test. So we're going to go into our update damage indicators function, and we're simply going to skip the second for each loop over here that checks for the time. So we're going to just disconnect this one, leave it out for now. So now we can test easily if things are working. And there's actually one thing that I forgot to do, and that's inside of the calculate damage function. So in here we adjust the damage yaw to our control rotation, but we need to make sure that we take into account that our character mesh is rotated 90 degrees. So we're going to disconnect the yaw over here, and we want to subtract 90 from this. Subtract 90, and then plug the result into the other subtract node. So because our character mesh by default is rotated 90 degrees, we need to make sure that we correct that over here. So with all of this stuff in place, we should have working damage indicators. So let's check it out. Let's host the game and let's join one. So we're going to make it free for all. Ready up, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to shoot this guy from the front left, and if the guy starts moving, so you can see the damage indicator actually keeps pointing in the correct location or direction actually. So that's working, and if I shoot the other guy, that should work as well. So you can see also rotating simply my controller rotation will make the damage indicator adjust. So this is actually working. So for now the damage indicators don't disappear, and if you want to fix that, you need to go back into the update damage indicator and make sure that we reconnect this for each loop. And then if we go into the create damage indicator, so over here this 1 second is the time the actual damage indicator is on screen by default. So 1 second is pretty short. You probably want to make it something like 2 or 3 seconds, something like that. And that will make it work a little bit better. So compile and save, and we have damage indicators done as well. So I think for the free-for-all part we're pretty much done, and in the next video we're going to start setting up our team deathmatch. So thanks for watching everybody, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later guys, bye bye.